Okay. Can you hear me better?
Yeah, it's very echoey.
Yeah, I don't know what that is. And I don't know what to do about it. Michelle, any suggestions?
Sorry.
Let me go out and come back in. Okay?
Okay. And we'll, okay.
Just give me a minute.
So Cher's just leaving us and going to come back in with hopes that her mic is working a little bit better with less feedback. Okay, there we go, Shira. So I'm going to have Pittsburgh. Can you go ahead and share with us?
Oh, sure. So we have a lot of non-Jewish educators in our school. We're in between Jewish educators, so we're kind of at a pivot point looking for a fresh inspiration. We do have a fairly low percentage of Jewish families, and a lot of them have not been to Israel itself, so we're kind of looking for just fresh inspiration and ways to pull it in and make it more of a reality to the children. A lot of them seem to act like it's a mythical place. It's because it's in all the stories, but they haven't experienced it themselves. So how do we make this place that many of them never experienced real?
Thank you.
Okay.
And for Jen in Vancouver?
Where's Jenna?
Jen, we can't hear you. I know you're off mute, but we can't actually hear you. Go ahead and try again. Yeah, we still can't hear you. Sorry. Yeah, if you want to go ahead and type, and then I'll read the message, that would be great. Thank you. So Devin in Kaplan Palisades, you want to go ahead and share with us?
We came on late, so we actually don't even know what the question is. Sorry.
The question was I was wondering what you're all hoping to get out of this session. And I was going to say to you, Devin, I think you've heard most of what I have to say.
I might have, but I have new people here with me, so
okay.
I'm on the call with them. So then I'll let them speak because I probably have heard a lot of it. So here, I will turn it towards.
Hi, Shira. I actually met with you in Orlando. I did one of your Reimagining Israel sessions in Orlando, one of the breakout sessions. I'm not really sure what I was hoping to get from this call. I'm just always looking for something new in terms of our Judaics and how to bring Israel in. We do have a very big Israeli population, but we're having a hard time crossing them into our American population. So we're just kind of hoping something would spark and I could come up with something new.
Okay. Good. Anybody else who hasn't contributed something?
Let's go ahead and call on our friends in Winnipeg. If you want to, I know you don't have a video, but we can unmute you and you can share with us.
Yeah. Unmute.
You're on mute. You can talk.
Oh, okay, perfect. I am Shirley from Winnipeg, and I have my colleague here, Natasha. And what we expect for the meeting today to bring Israel to the classroom every day. Not only for the Yom Ha'atzmaut or for the holidays, like how to bring Israel every day at our learning centers. That's what we expect from the meeting from today.
Thank you. We have a couple people who have chatted in who don't have microphones. So Barbara in Buffalo said that we have a large percentage of non-Jewish families and staff, and I'm always looking for ideas to connect to our families in Israel. And then Jen in Vancouver mentioned that I'm always looking to bring new ideas to our team on how to connect Israel to our daily practice. And then Teresa, I don't know if I said that you took your video off. If you are still there and want to share with us.
I'm sorry, I just, Donna just joined me.
Wonderful.
So.
Hi.
Hi.
Do you want to share with us, Teresa and Donna, what you're hoping to get from this
Our meeting.
Educators Forum today?
Yes, we also have a little bit less than half of our student population is Jewish, and as far as Jewish faculty members, it's just a small, very small percentage. So, but we do have professionals like Donna who had been on a trip to Israel, and so has a better understanding as a non-Jewish professional in a Jewish organization. After having that experience, it was extremely helpful. So.
And then I was also at the conference and I saw Shira speak, and she was amazing. So she's always good to hear.
Okay.
And,
well,
and we actually wanted to know when Shira was going to be in North America because we want her to come speak to our faculty.
That's a separate thing. And the fact is that I may pretty likely to go over some things that I've presented in other places, but I believe that you can hear things many times, and every time you hear it from kind of a different perspective. I want to make 3 comments before I start that relate to a couple things that have come up with a few people. One is about the Israeli families, one is about having experience or not having experience, and one is about teachers who are of other faiths. So the first one about the experience, don't get angry at me, but you're all really busy teaching Passover, and none of you were there. We teach many, many things of which we don't have experience. And either we learn or we're informed by other people who were closer to the experience, but there are certainly ways to bring Israel, to your centers, even if most of the staff has never been. I'll be the first one to say it is great if everybody can come at some point or another, but even if they can't, it doesn't need to be a really big stumbling block. And in fact, it's a wonderful opportunity for the next point to bring Israeli families in the places where you do have big Israeli populations. One of the ways to bring them into the community is to share the responsibility of bringing Israel, and using them as a resource and asking them to bring their Israel into your classrooms. And I'll get back to that later. But the whole subject of Israel education can be a wonderful bridge to Israeli families because they have an expertise and an experience that, that you don't. Even if many staff people have been to Israel, it's not the same as the experience that somebody brings who has lived there. And just as kind of a PS to that comment, working inside the Israeli school system, I want to tell you that what we teach the children about Israel here, okay, is in many ways not that different than what I would recommend you think about exposing the children in America to. The major difference is that the kids could go and actually see and be in certain places and have much easier access to it. But don't think for a moment that a child who lives in Jerusalem in the center of the city will necessarily go and visit all the places that are up north, which means that we have to think about ways to make Jerusalem real, and relevant to children who live at the other end of the country, and to make the other end of the country relevant to children who live in the center of the country. So while there are some marked differences, there are things that are similar. The third point about staff members who are Christian or Muslim or Buddhist or any other faith, Israel is important to all the big faith communities. And the stories that form the core of the narrative about Israel are shared by all the faith traditions, slightly different perspectives, slightly different venues, slightly different messaging. But I'm mentioning it because I think it's important to think about how to connect staff members to Israel through their own faith community. In other words, that, Israel is important to Christians because of the story of Jesus, to Muslims because of the story of Muhammad, and to Jews because of our own particular narrative. I'm not suggesting necessarily that everybody gets into learning the Old Testament, the New Testament, and the Quran. I'm just saying that I think it's a good idea to think about how to perhaps create connections for everybody on the staff. When teachers of other faiths come to visit Israel in a group with Jewish teachers, everybody has an important experience because the place has meaning for everybody. So if there's time in the end, I'll give you a few ideas that I really like and have been successful. But I'm not going to do that from the beginning because I really think that there's a process of getting to exactly what is right for your program with regards to Israel education. It's a process that requires asking questions, wondering, figuring out what it is you still need to know to achieve, your goals. But once you've articulated what it is you really want to do and why you're doing it, then the actual kinds of activities that you need to do to achieve those goals kind of fall into place. I'll give one example and I'm going to come back to it later. And please stop me at any time if you have a question or a wondering or you need a clarification about something. If one of the essential understandings I would like children to gain from engaging with Israel through a number of years of being at a JCC is that Israel is a place where there are children and families. Okay, that's a short articulation, but a very important point to my way of thinking. Then I begin to think about, okay, what are the kinds of things I need to do to help children reach that essential understanding? Why don't you tell me? Throw out a few things. If I have articulated to myself that when something that's very important about Israel that I want to transmit or convey or engage children with is the idea that there are children and families, what are some of the things I could do or that I need to do?
Show children photos of children and families living in Israel.
Okay. Give visual evidence of children and family, maybe videos. What else?
Experiences. Everyday life of children and families in Israel, not even important events.
Yeah, examples of everyday life, either from a storybook or because you have a resource in Israel who could maybe tell you something about it. That's the direction. And so there's something about the articulation, the why and the what of what we're doing that really kind of helps you set you on the path of what are the kinds of things you would want to do, what's the information that you need or that you're lacking, in order to do this really, really well, what kind of provocations can be created that speak to this particular understanding, how do you use resources in the community, and that can be families in your program or anybody in the JCC who has spent time in Israel, a substantial amount of time, and can speak to that issue. Okay, but I want to go back to why. I'm sure if I asked you now to tell me, actually, you know what? I am going to ask you. Not everybody has to speak, but maybe we could get just a couple of answers about why is it important to include Israel in the program of a Jewish early childhood program, a Jewish early childhood setting. Why Israel?
It's important to me. I believe it's important to teach about Israel, so that way the kids learn how important it is for us to have Israel. Before we didn't have the state of Israel, now we do since 1948, and we need to teach them about Zionism and the importance of Israel.
Because? Because
if we don't teach about Israel, it could go away. We need to always remember that it's not forever. We need to make sure that Israel stays with us forever. Okay, some other reasons about why Israel education in early childhood? Why not wait till kids can, sort of grasp more abstract concepts?
Everything that we teach them, every story that we teach them revolves around something that took place in Israel as the Jewish homeland. And we want to teach kids that we are still connected to that homeland where our story began. I think it actually brings all the other stories to life because it all revolves around things that happened. You know, why will they feel connected to that land unless we start, all of our Jewish stories revolve around that place and that special land that was given to us.
Yeah, that's like an excellent articulation of why. In other words, because it's the container of so many of the stories we tell the children, which means that it's built into what we are already teaching. We're just not always bringing it to a certain level. We're not always making the Israel aspect of a festival story or a Bible story apparent. I think there's absolutely no question that if you're more familiar with a certain landscape in Israel that was the backdrop for a particular story, that you can get inside the story. You can help the children get inside the story in a much, much better way. Okay, let's hear one more. Why Israel? Okay, then I'm gonna share with you, with your permission, a couple of reasons that to me are important, and that's after I've spent a very, very long time working on this whole topic of Israel education in early childhood. And I think you really have to know why. You have to tell yourself why you're doing what you're doing in order to do a good job of moving forward in terms of practice, and certainly in your ability to explain and share with parents why this is a part of of the curriculum. And it's a very essential part of the curriculum. And I want to separate for one moment. I think you all know we had elections this week. Half the people in Israel are very upset. Half the people in Israel are less upset. But there's no question that a lot of what goes on here, okay, is difficult sometimes for the generation of parents, especially in certain places in the United States, to deal with. And they sometimes automatically have like a wall, and they just hear that you're doing something about Israel, and they have issue with it, or they don't understand why. And so going back to the reasons that were given about it being so much a part of a story, and the whole idea of what our life was like before the state of Israel, what our life, I mean, the life of the Jewish people was like before the creation of the state of Israel, or that huge gap in history from the time that we were in the land of Israel and we were out of the land of Israel, that these are very essential things that don't have all that much to do with contemporary politics. In other words, when we're working with very, very young children, I think we're really talking about connecting the place, the scene of events, connecting a place that's very important to the festival cycle, and a lot of other very basic and essential things, and that the politics lives in a separate place. So I want to share some ideas with you. Can everybody see? Oh, I need to share my screen. Hang on. Forgot about that. Okay. Can everybody see? Okay. So first of all, and continuing on with, what's your name? What says M. Aberman, what's your name?
I'm Miriam Aberman. I'm the director of the Bernard Harwich JCC in Chicago.
Okay, Miriam. I just didn't, sometimes people are on a screen with another name. Hi. Okay, so Israel can be a key to understanding the Jewish festival cycle. I'm not going to read the slide to you. You can read. I just want to reiterate or emphasize what's in the slide. The festival cycle that Jews celebrate all over the world is linked to the seasons and the rhythms of the land of Israel. Okay, and that is very, very important because it helps the children make sense of it. When the children are a little bit more tuned into the seasons, the weather, the landscape of Israel, okay, and that's an ongoing thing from the beginning of the year, okay, then a lot of what we do at certain times makes more sense. We all know that it's customary to eat pomegranates on Rosh Hashanah. And often the reason given is because there's 613 seeds, although I've never sat and counted. That is a reason that the rabbis give, but the primary reason is because the pomegranate, which is one of the 7 species, is in full, it's ripe, and it's ready to eat at that time of year, during the Hebrew month of Tishrei. And so that was something that became accustomed to eat of the fruit of the land. On Sukkot, we use the lulav, which is the palm, the center palm frond, and it's from a date palm. And we use parts of that, we use the leaves of the date palm for the sukkah. We eat dates because it's also one of the 7 species of the land of Israel, and so on and so forth. I'm not going to go into more detail, but Israel can be a key to understanding the festival cycle. It can really open things up for kids. And I know there's somebody here from Chicago. I recall one of my first visits to the JCC, one of the JCCs in Chicago, and it was around Tu B'Shvat, and the kids hadn't been outside like for a month because there'd been so much snow, and the teacher was going on about the holiday of spring and the almond blossoms, and I thought that if I was 4 years old, I would be thinking, what on earth is this teacher talking about? And that the idea of more visuals, of sort of having been following the calendar since the beginning of school and the changes and the seasons and what grows in the land would have really helped the children to understand that in this special place called Israel, and I really do believe that we can establish at the beginning of the year that Israel is a special place to us, and then unpack and unfold that over the years that children and families are with us, and that because it's a special place to us, we want to learn more about it. And so it can be an ongoing presence that peaks at different times of the year and in different ways. What you said, Miriam, about it being a key to understanding of the holidays, the biblical material. Now, biblical material can be Bible stories, biblical material can be holiday stories, biblical material or source material can be rabbinic tales that we sometimes tell the children in order to do values education. And I chose 3 images in particular because I think that they really illustrate, certain points. On the upper slide, which is in the desert, and that is an acacia tree or an Eshel Avraham as it's in the Abraham stories. And when we know a little bit more about that landscape and we see how empty it is, and we can find some descriptions or create desert experiences, all of the stories that take place in the desert, which is many, okay? It's the children of Israel wandering in the desert. It's anything that we would teach about the patriarchs and the matriarchs, etc., and so on. It gets different meaning. The children are able to inhabit the story and engage with it in a very different way. The bottom slide is actually from today, from, 2 years ago. And it's a photograph of 2 kids on Hanukkah vacation here in Israel going to the caves of the Maccabees, where they saw a reenactment of the Hanukkah story. And now there's a couple things going on here. First of all, it's real live children, okay, that are doing something fun on their vacation. It's bringing the idea to the Hanukkah story, which has to do with the terrain between Modi'in and Jerusalem, which is full of thousands of caves, and which is actually how the 3-year battle against the Greeks was fought, in the caves. And that's something, that's also of interest, and seeing how people are dressed. So there's a lot that can be done to further understanding about all the stories we spend so much time telling. And then, of course, there's the idea that Israel can help children begin and families begin to understand that the Jewish people is something much bigger than my family, my classroom, my community, and my city, etc., and so on. Obviously, for children of a different faith than Judaism, we have to find the right language to talk about it. But again, if they have a personal connection, it makes it all a lot easier. So having a good why and articulating your why, okay, is, I think, very important. Just as reflecting on what you're already doing and what are the messages and what are the messages of what you're already doing. How might the children possibly understand what you're doing? And this was a big lesson that I learned when I was working in with Shalom Sesame and Sesame Street, because television is a medium that you put out there and you actually have absolutely no idea what a child might make of it. That's not so in the classroom, but when you are looking at stuff, either creating stuff or reflecting on stuff, it's a very interesting screen through which to look at what you're doing. In other words, to wonder, I wonder what the children might make of this, and to take that in all directions and to see if it satisfies what you think, what you hope to achieve. So this whole idea, and part of that is really, besides being able to say, why are we teaching Israel? Why is it important in our center? What's the image of Israel that we're teaching? And there's so many different Israels. There are very different narratives. Everybody sees it through their own lens. Where I work, we created a book called What is Eretz Yisrael? And it's through the perspective of animals. And for the desert, for the camel, the land of Israel is the desert. And for the stork, okay, it's obviously the ocean and bodies of water. In other words, so there's so many variables that influence actually what the Israel is that you're conveying. So understanding the images you and your staff are holding, and the image that you want to convey is also a very big part of the process. And again, I'm talking about process that you work on to begin to understand how to implement what you want to do in your center. And another point that I think is really important is to think about what you want children to understand at the end of 3 or 4 years with you. Not the 2s and the 3s and the 4s, but to look at the span of years that you have, because it's so much more time, and understandings are built one on top of the other, and to really be looking forward and talking about the essential understandings and ideas that you really want children to engage with. For me, this process is key to the whole thing. It's what yields the best kind of activities, the best kind of engagements, because it's very clear what you want to do. So asking in staff, okay, and I would say where you have big populations of Israeli families, I would engage them in this conversation. What are the things that they think they would like young children in America, or their own children who are living permanently or temporarily in America, to understand about Israel? What would they like to understand better? So, this is a really important part of the process, and the more clearly you can articulate the understandings, the better position you are to create a really robust, year-long integrated Israel education program. Once you have a list of understandings, then you can run it through several screens, okay? And I've listed some questions here that you can ask about every single list that you make, whether it's appropriate, what kind of activities you need to design to help children construct the understanding, what do you need to know that maybe you don't know, and where can you help get that information? How do you link this understanding to other things that you're doing and other things the children are doing, the children have learned or know about. Children and families is a good example. Children in your programs have experience of families and the kinds of things that families do together, and what siblings like to do together, and where they spend leisure time, and what makes their home a home. And so this is a basis for opening up the children's wondering about what goes on in this place called Israel and what's it like to be in a family. And as I said earlier, what kinds of invitations or provocations you can create in order to get to the understandings. I want to go back for a minute. Let me finish this and then we'll go back. Okay, another piece of the process is what your Israel inventory. What resources do you have available to you in your community that can help you with your Israel initiative? Families, staff people at the JCC. If you're in a large community that has many Israelis, then you're likely also to find Israeli products. You may find representation of Israeli governmental offices or El Al Airlines or all kinds of places that might or might not be good about getting you resources, but they may be able to help you. Do you have an agency of a central agency of Jewish education? Do you have any? I mean, if you would begin to talk about it, the list can become very, very long. And knowing what is available to you also helps you plan what you can do and how you can do it and who can help you with it. Okay, let me put this down. And get back to our, oops, want to move you. Okay, let's get back. I'm going to stop sharing for a minute. Okay, I want to throw that out to you for a second, the whole idea of essential understandings. Please, what would you like children to understand about Israel by the time they leave your JCC? We said a place where there's children and families. We said a place where many important stories happened. Okay? What else?
Just that there are so many similarities in the everyday life between here and Israel, but also
okay, that there are many things in Israel that are similar to our reality in Israel. What else?
And that even though we have similarities, we also have differences. You know, we can look into take the children in our community, and our community is laid out differently because our landscape is different. So how does this affect our story versus the story in Israel?
That's okay. The unique aspect, and you guys in Pittsburgh you're very lucky because you have Carmiel. So you have an actual place in Israel that you can connect and communicate with to get some of the information that you might need. More understandings. Come on, let's throw them out to the air.
I think that Israel is a place that is special for us as the Jewish people. It's our homeland, and to help them develop, to begin to develop the seeds of a love for a place, even if it's not right here, that we can still feel, an attachment to it.
Okay, that it's considered a home for the Jewish people. Okay, which is part of the larger story. What else? Palo Alto folks, what else?
I think we're on now. There we go.
We want to make understanding of love to Hebrew and love to Israel as a state, to understand it's a real place, that kids live there, that a lot of our families live there, and we share a special love and a relationship with Israel. And we have a lot of Hebrew throughout our schedule of the day, throughout of places in our campus. This is one of the understandings we're striving for.
Okay, so I want to separate that. I want to put love in a separate category because love is a bit of an abstract, subjective thing, and I don't actually know how you teach it. You model it. In other words, we can model that Israel is a very special and important place to us. But a couple of the other things you said are fabulous. Israel's a place where just about everybody speaks Hebrew. It's the official language. TV is in Hebrew, signs are in Hebrew, shopping is in Hebrew. I mean, that's a very important understanding about Israel. And of course, there's the backstory about why we speak Hebrew, which is also part of the bigger story, that Israel is a special place, that families and children, as we already said, that we want we want the children in our school to understand that Israel is a real home for many of our families in Palo Alto, okay? Correct. So the list can be very long. I could add for you. I want the children to understand that Israel is an important place to many different people who are Jewish and people who are of other faiths. Israel is old and new at the same time, okay? Israel is very diverse because you have people coming from all different kinds of countries. There are many languages spoken, there are many food traditions, there are many music traditions. Okay, we could go on, but we can get a compact list. In fact, I have lists that have been generated by directors and educators that it's usually about 20, not more. And when you start putting the other screens, like what if this is appropriate for all the children in our JCC, what's appropriate only for the older children, you begin to see a program emerging. Okay, you really begin to see a program emerging, especially if you then ask the question, and where does this fit in to what we are already teaching? Where month by month does this jive with the holidays we're teaching or the Jewish values we're teaching? Everything pretty much in a Judaic curriculum has or can have an Israel perspective. And it can have an ancient connection to the land and a contemporary connection to the state. Because if we take any holiday, okay, we've got the story, but we've also got the contemporary family and child, just like the kid in your JCC, and how they celebrate and what they learn in preschool. And that's true of every single festival. And in that way, by the way, we are also conveying the old and the new piece. Okay? So month by month and through the festival cycle. Now, you say, okay, what does Israel have to do with Jewish values more than any other place? Well, one of the ways, and I'm not saying you have to do it, I'm just trying to give these as examples, is that a lot of the stories or the Jewish parables or Jewish value stories that we share with children, that were given to us by the great rabbis, were written in the north of Israel. In other words, we can learn about where these rabbis lived and what their life might have been like a long time ago. Again, this is for older children. But I'm saying if we begin to examine and be much more intentional in our thinking processes and in our work at connecting and in understanding the resources we have available to us, we can see the Israel perspective, and then we can choose whether it's appropriate and where it fits in. You know, those of you, I think it was in San Diego, you talked about giving the true facts or the clarity of the facts. Okay, so first of all, none of us were there to know the true facts of how it actually happened, but we have an accounting of it. And the accounting in the Torah, our concern is how to be authentic, okay, and how to be true to the text, okay, and choose the pieces of the text that convey the story, okay, and not bring the parts of this text that are maybe not appropriate for children or too difficult for children without wrecking the story. In other words, always asking the question of what pieces could I possibly take out of this story? Okay, could I take out of this story and still have all the story that I need? Okay, and learning, okay, learning for yourself from the actual Bible or primary source of the story and working with that. And Israel certainly weaves into these stories. In other words, Passover, they were in Egypt, but once they left Egypt, they were on their way to the land of Israel because that was the land that was promised to Abraham. So this Israel is always woven in and out of all the stories that we tell. Sometimes we're not aware of it. We have to work a little harder to find it. But Israel has always had a very central role within the bigger Jewish story. And in fact, the stories we tell all year long of the festivals are the story of the Jewish people. They're just not in chronological order, okay? But if we use the time before Yom HaAtzmaut to retell the stories that we've been telling all year long, but in chronological order, in sort of a timeline, then all of a sudden a lot of things make more sense to the children. Like why it's special, why Israel is always a part of the story, why we call it home, because the fact of the matter is that once upon a time, the entire Jewish people lived in the land of Israel, and then things happened. And when things happened and they had to leave, a lot of Jewish life was about wanting to come back home and wanting to remember coming back home, remembering home. And so songs were written about the land of Israel. We ate foods from the land of Israel at holiday time, so we would remember the taste of the fruit that grew on the land. Prayers were said about going back to Israel. So it's kind of all of a piece, but we need to like deconstruct it and reconstruct it based on what we've done with the children, so that they get a different sense of the whole thing. Is that clear to you, or do you need me to explain it more?
That really helps.
That really helps? Okay, what I actually want to do, I'm going to share again for a moment, and I'm going to very quickly run through it for you. Then I want to say a few things and maybe, yes, give you a few ideas because our time is actually running out. So, okay. I am going to start from the beginning, and I'm going to tell you in very brief points. I'm not going to go into the whole storytelling mode, but I'm going to share with you. The story of the connection between the land of Israel and the people of Israel and the Jewish people begins with the promise of the land to Abraham. Okay? You may or may not tell this story. I would urge you to go look at the story in the Bible, because the stories of the matriarchs and the patriarchs are wonderful stories for children and include many of our Jewish values and can be brought to children in amazing ways. That's the topic of another webinar. So this is point number one. The next major life-changing event in the story of the Jewish people is the Exodus, which you're all busy engaging with now, that story, okay? So the children have some knowledge of that story. After the Exodus, we have the giving of the Torah and the wandering in the desert till they actually got to Israel. And we tell this story, or we mention this, when it's Shavuot. Okay? After the children of Israel got to the land of Israel, and they came to live in the land, and they built homes, and they worked the land, but the most significant thing that happened was the building of the temple. And where did children hear about that? Where did children meet the temple? Somebody answer, please.
Hanukkah?
Hanukkah, of course. This is not an unfamiliar thing to the children. It's there. It needs to be retrieved and sort of contextualized. And then when the temple was destroyed, they had to leave home, and they went to live in many different places, which is why I'm sitting in Jerusalem, but I came from America, and you guys are living in Pittsburgh and San Diego, and I heard from somebody's accent that I think they're from South America originally. This is the story of the Jewish people, okay? And up until then, we have associative webs that the children can attach to in the telling of this story. And after many, many years of living in many, many different places, there was a man who thought it would be a really great idea if the Jews could have a place of their own and go back to live in the land of Israel like they once did. And people started coming back. What do you know? Started building homes, started, thinking about what it would be like if they could be in charge of themselves. And just for a moment to go back to Passover, we often spend time in Passover talking about building and the hard work of slavery. But the bottom line is that slavery is when you have no control over anything. It's when somebody else is always telling you what to do. And part of the slavery experience is of being not in your own home, not being able to determine what you want to do in your life. And that's a way of talking about one aspect of the Passover holiday that connects to this idea of wanting to be at home, wanting to be in charge, wanting to live the way we wanted to live. And then we have Israel's birthday. And why is Israel's birthday so important? Because finally, there was a place that any Jew could come to if they wanted to and call home, and where the Jewish people could live the way they wanted to and determine for themselves, etc., and so on. And that's why we celebrate. So that's like in a total nutshell, but that's the story of the story of the Jewish people, in which Israel always has a central role, and where it all of a sudden can make a different kind of sense for the children. So I think that is really a very important thing to kind of keep in mind, that we've been telling the story. We just haven't been zooming in as much as we might be able to on the Israel piece of it, and the necessary teaching aids or things that we would put into, into our space to help children engage. Certainly Yom Ha'atzmaut is a time, if all year long we are putting Israel gently into our curriculum at different places. And I mean, my approach and in my work, even for here in Israel, is to be looking at it month by Hebrew month, and seeing how we fit it into what we're doing. But I think that if you've done all of the things that I mentioned, reflecting on what you're already doing, why are we doing Israel? What do we want the kids to understand? What do we need to know? What resources do we have available? How do we connect it to all what we're already doing? I think you'll be really well on the road to a very robust Israel initiative within your school. I present this very strongly because I really think it's essential to having good Israel programming. And I could have done an hour of great ideas, I promise you. And then when I got to the end of the hour, or you got to the end of the ideas that you liked, I don't know if you'd know how to continue, because what I'm trying to share with you is a way of thinking about it. Okay, because the way of thinking will lead you to the great ideas. Yom Ha'atzmaut is the time when we kind of pull everything, put everything under a zoom lens, okay, and that's fine. And I will share, we have 5 minutes, so before I just share a few ideas, does anybody have questions? Is anybody wondering about something? Does anybody need clarification? Because now would be the time.
We would love to hear your ideas. We're anxious and excited.
Okay, but did I convey my thinking? Somebody asked if I was sending the slides. Okay, I can send the slides, but this has all been written in a document that I created for you guys, and we're just working on how to roll it out and get it to everybody. So you need a little patience, but if it'll be helpful to have the presentation or some of the slides, then I'll talk to Michelle separately about how we can do that. Okay?
Yes, and Cher, just to jump in, if you want to send me the slides, I'll put them on jcca.me along with this recording, so you'll have both the slides and this recording as reference early next week.
Okay, so if I need to go over the presentations, because it's several different presentations, but we can get you. Okay, so I'm going to just give you some tried and true ideas that have worked in many places, but please don't do them till you thought about them a little bit and asked a couple of questions, okay? So, 1, and these are all year-long ideas. These are not Yom Ha'atzmaut ideas, okay? Jews traditionally, for all the thousands of years that we weren't in the land of Israel, or most of the Jewish people weren't in the land of Israel, because there were always some, and there was no YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, anything, okay? Jews kept Israel in mind by very simply the sages, the rabbinic sages, put it into their everyday lives. You mentioned Israel when you ate, 3 times a day when you said the grace after meals, Birkat Hamazon. You faced Jerusalem when you prayed, okay? You mentioned Israel in every life cycle event and many other things that linked it to everyday action. So you can first of all say, how do we do something every day that just connects us to Israel, okay? Just briefly. And one idea that was developed in a school that I worked with was figuring out, first of all, what's the wall in your classroom that faces Israel? Because in a synagogue, the Holy Ark will always be facing Israel, facing Jerusalem, because that's the direction that you orient yourself to. Now, you don't have to pray, but you can make note of the fact, that this is where Israel is, and when we look at it, we think about it, and you can maybe just start your day with, closing your eyes and saying, along with whatever else you say to welcome the day, that let's close our eyes and just, think about Israel for a minute and hope that everything is good there. This is, I'm leaving up to you. But that wall can become the place where whatever visual representations or things that you're working on around Israel, or pictures of Jerusalem, I'm leaving this again to you, but that can be the space. And in that way, you are really mirroring the Jewish tradition in terms of how we kept Israel in our hearts and in our minds, even when it was out of sight, by doing that very simple thing. That's one idea. Another idea is Israel in a bag, which ain't so different from Shabbat in a box or Shabbat in a bag. In other words, to create a bag or a box that goes home every weekend with another child, okay, and it is full of things, picture books about Israel, story books about Israel, even if they're in Hebrew, a storybook in Hebrew that the children know because it was translated from English, an Israeli card game, anything that you could think of that would have a family engagement over the weekend that has something to do with Israel. You can put a notebook in it and ask parents and families to write down all the questions, all the things. What do you wonder about Israel? Okay? And so kind of collect from parents those kind of things. You can invite parents to add something to the bag. I think you get the idea. And that's another way of just bringing it in without, kind of very gently and putting it into the home arena. With an explanation to parents about Israel's a special place for us. We want the children, we want all of you to learn a little bit more about Israel. So here are a few things that you can play with or engage with. It can be a DVD, it can be a million things. That's another idea. A third idea is to have a map of Israel, but a map that's big enough to stick things on, to walk on, to et cetera and so on. My organization has a map. We are right now, as I speak, it's going to print in English and Hebrew, and I'll let you know when that's available. But using a map to be able to learn about certain places, to be able to contextualize certain stories that you're learning, where something happened, where Jerusalem is, to see what kind of different landscapes there are in Israel, to see that there's something called the Israel Trail. You can walk from one end of Israel to the other, which is kind of a very cool thing for kids to contemplate. So having a map that you attach postcards, pictures, and the more Israeli families you have, the more resources and input you have, and I'm going to roll from that right into the famous trip to Israel. Okay, I would say about 80% of Jewish early childhood programs around the world, when you ask, what do you do for Yom Ha'atzmaut, they tell you they do a trip to Israel. Okay, I am not a big fan of the trip to Israel once a year. But, and I used to be I really used to dump on it, but then I realized it's a special thing for kids. And I have been actually in classrooms where a teenager comes in and says, Mrs. Shapiro, I remember that trip to Israel. There's something about it that's powerful. I think children also get an important message about the importance of Israel to the teachers, because they make themselves crazy setting this whole thing up. So taking the best part of it, that it's an experience, but kind of toning it down or dialing it back, I could suggest to you, think about having a trip every week. Get yourselves a magic carpet, make up a going to Israel song, take a visit to one place, one little place, a picture, a story, okay? A red dot on the map that you visited the place. This is, again, where people who have experience of Israel or who lived in Israel can be your guides on this little trip. And think about it. If you do it every week or even every other week, by the time Yom Ha'atzmaut rolls around, you will have visited 20 different places in Israel. And all of these things, by the way, if you're a little bit intentional and thoughtful about it, okay, the children can be included in generating a lot of how it's shaped. You can visit places that go with what you're learning about. In other words, it would be natural in the month of Kislev around Hanukkah time to visit Modi'in, to visit Jerusalem, to go learn something about the caves in the area, etc., and so on. The last idea, okay, is to think about or learn about or access some of the really classical Israeli children's songs and stories that really tell something about Israel, and learn them, not to learn the Hebrew unless it's appropriate for your setting, because you can convey these things in English, but they give a glimpse of life in Israel, they give a glimpse of the festival cycle and the landscape. These are all things, by the way, in terms of the resources that we hope to be working on in the next little while that I'm going to be working on preparing for JCC educators. So that's like the 4 or 5 big ones that you can really do all year long, and it can grow, and the children can be very active. Oh, and one more idea that I would share is using your public space to invite families, children, staff to wonder about Israel. And so that might be to take select images and blow them up and attractively hang them in your foyer or in different places in the public space. Put a piece of paper or oak tag or whatever, but put it, or a chalkboard, and invite people to respond to the pictures. What do they think? What do they wonder? What do they know? Etc. and so on. It's another way of very organic, first of all, of making Israel present in your environment, and of engaging your families and other people in this whole question of, you know, of what is Israel? What is this diverse and wonderful, crazy place? The last thing I want to encourage you to do before we get offline is to have a look at the Shalom Sesame YouTube. There are amazing resources there. I am not one of the people who has a big problem with putting children in front of a screen for half an hour if it's meaningful content and it's being mediated correctly, you know, properly. But if you don't want to do that, on the YouTube channel, there's hundreds of videos that have been disaggregated from the episodes. And for working with a small group of children and a tablet, they are amazing, amazing triggers for conversations about Israel. They are things that you can send home, you know, to parents and ask them to watch together a 3-minute clip about Grover visiting Jerusalem and to send in all their questions. They were never intended to teach the whole story. They were intended to trigger thinking and imagination and questions. And so I think that the one thing I want to share with you before I get offline, and before we all say goodbye and Chag Sameach, is actually the Shalom Sesame theme song, because I think it's a wonderful piece to engage children with. So hang right on for a moment. Okay, share. Shalom Sesame theme song. Let me move all of you over.
It's such a beautiful day. Come on with us, we'll travel to a land where we can play. Shalom Sesame, come along. Shalom Sesame. We'll go to a place that we can explore with all our friends and our family. Shalom Sesame. We'll sing a song. Shalom Sesame. Come along. Brand new things all around. We'll open our eyes and we will see. Shalom Sesame, come along. Shalom Sesame, we'll sing a song. Shalom Sesame, we will see. Shalom Sesame, come with me.
That was the entire country. Oops. Wait a minute, I gotta turn something off. Go away, go away. That was a trip through Israel in 1 minute and 10 seconds. That's maybe not the best example of the materials because there's a lot of little live action segments about real children and real places, you know, shot on site. You should look at the collection. But even just this one little piece, you know, I can ask you, I wonder what part of that little video clip you like the best. I wonder which one you think is the most important. It can generate a lot of conversations. So that's like a really big resource. A lot of teachers have kind of shied away from using it because of, you know, feelings about not having kids on screen time. But I think that when it's used appropriately and you're talking about, you know, 3 minutes on screen in order to generate, you know, all kinds of things, because who knows where the kids can take it, that it is a wonderful resource that's available to you. Does anybody have any questions or anything else they'd like to share or
Palo Alto would love a map. When you're ready with your maps, we're your first client.
Okay, I'll be getting a notice out about all of that stuff. Anybody else have a question, clarification? I hope I met your expectations. I am available to all of you by email. If you want to have a Zoom conversation individually, you just let Michelle or Mackenzie know, or they'll send you my contact information and contact me directly. If you need help with the process, if you're missing some resources, if I can help about where to get it, send you links to stuff. That's my role in the JCC and the Sheva faculty. So I look forward to continuing this conversation, and I wish you all a very happy Passover. Pesach.
Thank you so much. Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach.
Thank you, Sheva.
And Laila Tov, because it's nighttime here in Jerusalem. Bye.